So are we good to go?
Yes, we are.
Okay. So hello, everybody that's already joined us. I see there's a few more people coming in. I'm going to try and share my screen here. I'm Julie Rodewald, the Voter Services Director for the League of Women Voters. And I want to welcome everybody to this session of Lunch with the League. Wanted to just remind those of you who haven't joined us before that the League is a nonpartisan organization, which means that we don't support or oppose political parties or candidates. And these lunches are our mission for this election to help our citizens register, learn, and vote. And that's part of what we're doing today, is to impart information to everybody. A couple of housekeeping items. If you've been here before, you know to submit your questions via Q&A or chat, that our sessions are being recorded and they are available on our website, Facebook, and YouTube. So today we're going to be talking about, can one vote really make a difference? And I want to welcome, I'm going to stop the screen share. I want to welcome Shelley Higginbotham, who is a League member and also was involved in a campaign that ended up being decided by 2 votes. So Shelley's going to give us her take on what can one vote really make a difference. So Shelley, you won for a 3rd term for the mayor of Pismo Beach by a very small margin, 2 votes. Why don't you tell us about that? And did you think that the race was going to be that close?
Thank you, Julie. And you were there firsthand to watch just about every step of it. 2014 election was an interesting year for 3 mayors in the county, very close races. So I had no idea the race was going to be that close. Election night, it was down to about 15, 16 votes, which was disheartening, humbling, I have to say, because I had already served about 10 years with the city. And so it was clear that should I end up winning the election, I had some work to do. So now the vote is this close, it's 15, but now there's this waiting game of counting all the provisional votes and other mail-in votes that came in perhaps later or came in election night. And we're at a waiting game. And Julie, you can help me out here. I'm not sure how long it took to finally get the final, it was a 2-vote difference.
Yeah, you know, going back and trying to remember, I would say it probably took at least a week, if not 10 days, 10 to, a week to 2 weeks probably before we had counted all the ballots in your race, although we still hadn't certified the entire election. That probably didn't come until the end of November.
Right, right. So once we got word from the clerk recorder's office that it was a 2-vote margin, then the discussion pivoted to a recount. And what does that mean? What does that entail? And I wasn't going to initiate that because I was up 2 votes, but my opponent started a GoFundMe because there's a fee, because it's costly to the clerk recorder's office to go back and retabulate all of the ballots. And I got to watch that firsthand, which is a separate story later. So the GoFundMe page was posted. I got a call from a very good friend and colleague, Mayor Jamie Irons. He was mayor at the time of Morro Bay. He said, Shelley, go fund the rest of that GoFundMe. Get this done. And I said, great advice. So I immediately, I think it was like a $400 deficit, put the money in, and that way, then that money could immediately start to go to the clerk recorders to start the recount. And I was grateful because it was also Thanksgiving time. And the longer this drug on, it just was very unsettling and really wanted some closure. So we moved forward with the recount. And apparently, according to the rules, if you're a candidate involved in a recount, you can go back behind the scenes and watch the recounting process, which I was anxious to do. And it gave me really an opportunity, which I'd never seen behind the scenes, and how hard Julie and her team worked on elections, not counting all the other things that you did, and looking at why ballots were not accepted and what were provisional. And it was a fascinating process, albeit a little painful. I wish it wasn't my election at the time. But I think it took 2 days, Julie, maybe 2.5 days.
I think that's right. Yeah.
And once she said, "This is it, it's 2 votes," there were a few tears that I shed of relief and gratitude that it was done. And then the work was going to have to begin on my part to really reach out and find a bridge and mend fences that obviously needed to be mended. After all these years serving, there's obviously a constituency that was unhappy. And I reflected on that. I believe as mayor, I spent a lot of time kind of in a macro level. I was president of SLOCOG and president of RTA and president of the League of California Cities. So on a macro level, I was really trying to represent Pismo Beach, and perhaps didn't spend as much time as I should have on the one-on-one and reaching out to voters. So that was a good learning lesson for me. And we had there were 2 big issues facing Pismo Beach that election. And one was Spanish Springs. Everybody will remember that huge development. And the other was the Chapman House, which was really a divisive issue in Shell Beach. And so I think those were 2 issues that pretty much dictated the themes of that election that year. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, Shelley, I have to say that when you came up with the remaining funds on that for the GoFundMe account to help pay for the recount, it spoke volumes to people, and I know your opponent certainly appreciated it. And I think it was good advice from Mayor Irons to let's get this behind us. And if it's going to be a 2-vote difference, then yeah, we need to know that that's what it is. I didn't win by a huge margin. I think it's one of those things as a candidate that you must go back on and say, kind of like, where did I go wrong? And
absolutely,
why didn't I have the support of more? I mean, it was such an evenly divided community, and where did I lose that support? So it's not just a celebratory win, even though there was celebration in it, but it's a reflective win, because it's certainly the voters sent a message, that obviously you paid attention to and tried to do what was best for those constituents that maybe weren't so pleased with what you had been doing before.
Definitely. And I tell you, if I had $1 for every person that told me or my husband that they were the 2-vote difference, I'd be set. We'd have our great retirement. It was so interesting. And but the other sad part was I heard from a lot of people that said I didn't vote, and I'm very, very sorry. For whatever reason, things going on in their life, or they just got busy. And I think it was a very good lesson for those constituents that realize that their vote counts. It always counts. So it was an interesting year. That was the year that the mayor in Arroyo Grande lost to a write-in candidate.
Right.
And it was the year that mayor of Atascadero his opponent was somebody of not the best character, and he had a very close margin. So it was an interesting election for mayors in 2014.
Yeah, I guess so. And it's good. It's a good lesson, like you say, for people who didn't vote. Imagine if you had lost by 2 votes and you had people who said, "Oh, I was going to vote for her and I just forgot to turn in my ballot or vote. I mean, that's what we really emphasize to people, that it's every vote can make a difference, and don't think that, you know, one out of, and I think there were about 3,300 ballots cast in
I think so.
your election. So it's not a huge, but it's not that small either. And I think it does make people realize how important it is. And the other thing that I want to say too is, living through that recount with you, recounts are hard on elections officials, just like they are, because everything is so under the microscope, and how much we try and control that whole process is now being exposed to you know, the light of the day, which is how it should be. And anybody can come in and observe what's happening in an elections office when they start processing vote by mail ballots, and going through the provisionals, and all those sorts of things. All of those activities are open to the public. Unfortunately, this year, it makes it harder because we've got the COVID restrictions. So it's, you know, you can't just bring in 10 people to sit there and watch, you know, because there's just not the room. So I'm not sure how the county clerk's offices or the elections offices are going to deal with that, but it is the right of the public to come in and watch everything. And I just want to say too, that, you know, I think it was a 2.5 day process. We finished around noon on the third day, and when I told Shelley that she had won, it was a 2-vote margin, she shed a few tears, I shed a few tears, and one of my IT staff said, wait, there's no crying in elections. You can't be crying in elections. But it was such an emotional release, and seeing the emotion that you and your opponents were going through when we were going through the process was just really, it was a great release and relief to get it done. So while it's a good experience, you know, you were only, in my 20 years, you were only my second recount. The one before that was a measure in Grover Beach that lost by 4 votes. So it's not that common, at least it didn't used to be that common that it happened. I think, you know, elections are getting closer these days. But anyway, it was a great experience, and I'm really glad it's all behind us, right? And it ended up the way that it did, and you were able to serve the voters of Pismo Beach for another 2 years. So now I'm just going to return to share screen for a moment, and hopefully I can make this work, because I want to talk about tie votes. So Shelley won a very close election by 2 votes. But really, when you think about it, now it really becomes critical. We have had tied contests before. In 2012, we had a San Miguel Community Services District tie for second place. There were only 614 ballots cast. That's my only, in 20 years of running elections, that was my only tie in an election. And okay, it makes sense. 614 ballots cast, that's, you know, an evenly divided community. But in 2017, this one just really shocked me. The Virginia House of Delegates contest ended in a tie, and there were over 25,000 ballots cast. Now, you might say, how do we break ties? And so I'm going to show you, hopefully, a video that kind of brings this to light. Hopefully you guys can see that. Nod your head.
People would be horrified to know we could flip a coin and decide who's going to represent them for 2 or 4 or 6 years.
You may be surprised to hear that coin tosses played any role, first of all, in American politics, second, in last night's results.
We had a flat-out tie. The end-up result is that we are going to have to cast lots. We're going to roll dice. It's any game of chance to decide. I'm just squeamish about it personally.
I had suggested that maybe we play a game of 5-card draw. Whoever has the best hand then would win.
Particular played rock, paper,
because I thought I could beat him.
The idea of drawing cards to decide an election is ridiculous.
What a tie tells me is that public opinion really is evenly divided.
I am not flipping a coin. I am not drawing straws. I am not rolling marbles. I'm not doing what you do in elementary school. This is serious business.
The reason that Cox is the speaker in the first place is because they picked a name of one of the two candidates out of a poll.
Hillary Clinton won 6 back-to-back coin tosses against opponent Bernie Sanders. I had 29 people on one side supporting Hillary Clinton. I had 29 people on the other side that supported Bernie Sanders. The worst nightmare scenario. When you flip a coin, you're basically taking the results of the election out of the voters' hands and putting it in the fake.
A coin a lot cheaper than a whole other election.
It's serious business with serious consequences. Ending an election with a game of chance is wrong and a great disservice to our democratic process.
Oh, good, it stopped. So I think people would be shocked to know that's how we decide ties. When we had the tie for the Miguel CSD, we bought a deck of cards, brought the two candidates in, the cards were sealed, we opened them, we shuffled them, we set out the ground rules, spread those over the table, and then both candidates drew a card, and whoever got the highest card was declared the winner. And I had mentioned to Shelley before we started this webinar that I was going to ask her, how would you feel about if it was a tie election, ended up in a tie, maybe after the recount, we found 2 ballots that should have been counted for your opponent, and ended up in a tie, and then we're going to basically run a game of chance to decide the mayor of Pismo Beach.
I wouldn't have liked that very much. You put so much energy into a campaign and a motion, and then to say, okay, we're going to flip a coin. For me, it just feels like it takes away from the actual process, the voting process, and I wouldn't like that. Before in Pismo Beach, before they decided to have a direct elected mayor, they put that on the ballot. They used to just take a deck of cards out and do whoever pulled the highest card. So it has been done
amongst the council members.
Yes, yes.
Interesting.
So they decided to make it more formal and put it on the ballot. So the very fact that the voters of Pismo Beach chose to have an elected mayor versus, pulling a card from the deck tells me that they would want that process of voting and not flipping a coin in some other way to choose.
Right. It's such an interesting thing in California and obviously around the nation. How do you decide ties? And, they don't come up that often, but, to conduct another election, either from the elections officials or the candidates, another 3 months of campaigning or 2 months of campaigning, more ballots to print. I mean, everything that goes into that, and having a vacant seat for as long as it takes to conduct that second election. It's kind of like there's no good answer. And it's sort of what the states have come up with as a way to make it be as fair as possible without having to go through the expense. But yeah, it's I wouldn't envy any candidate that is subjected to that kind of a resolution to their election, because like you say, the candidates work so hard to encourage the voters to vote, and it would just be a real shame to have that happen.
I think it does a disservice to the process, very definitely.
Yeah, it takes away the seriousness of it in a way, you know, that's how it could be decided. And then you think, well, why didn't you just decide that at the very beginning and you know, skip the last 3
Call it
months?
good.
Yeah, exactly. So do you have anything else to add, Shelley? I don't
Well,
see any questions, but we can go ahead and go ahead.
sure. Well, I just appreciate the opportunity to further reinforce the importance of voting. I mean, we at the League get that. You certainly, as the clerk recorder, understood the importance. And so I don't mind being a poster child for the importance of voting, which is why I appreciate the League of Women Voters and why I'm really involved in Voters Edge, because we need to have well-informed, engaged voters. And it's easy for me to speak to that, not only having served, but then as a candidate that won by 2 votes. It just further reinforces how important it is to get people engaged and get the word out. So thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah, I'm glad that you could join us. We did just have a couple of questions pop up, and I don't know, I'll direct this to you. What are your thoughts on the lack of candidates running in Arroyo Grande? The incumbents, mayor, and 2 council members have no candidates running against them. And I don't know if you want to weigh in on that.
I can't really speak to the politics in Arroyo Grande and a lack of election and what that reflects. I do know 2 years ago, Pismo Beach didn't have an election. There weren't any candidates that stepped up to run. So you can debate it. You can say that the constituency is very happy with the way that the city is being run and feel as though there's effective leadership. Or you could take a different stance and say, it's really hard to be a candidate at any level of government. And not only does it take a lot of time and sometimes money, but you really put yourself out there and you put your family out there, and you have to really develop a thick skin. As sad as that is, you're oftentimes as a candidate not just accepted and appreciated for stepping up and running, but your whole life then becomes like you're in a glass bottle, and people can just make it personal instead of looking at the reasons why you want to run and what qualities you can bring to the city or board of supervisor district you want to serve. So I think there's two things going on.
Right, you know, and there was a quote, and I wish I knew who said it, but it was repeated to me by one of my opponents in my first election, and it was somebody that was very involved on a national level, had worked for presidents, and they asked him upon his retirement, what is your greatest regret? And he said that I never had the courage to run for public office. And you realize that it does take not only time and energy and money, but it does take a tremendous amount of courage to put yourself out. So I see that side of it as well when we look at you know, those contests that don't have sufficient candidates to force something to an election. And there are many of our community services districts and school districts that are in the same position, that they're not on the ballot because it was only if there were 2 positions to be filled, there were only 2 candidates running. So it's not just in the city. So one question that we have here is, it is interesting that if amazingly every eligible voter voted and it was a tie, what is the answer? Well, I think probably my response to that would be, not every eligible voter voted. There were, you know, in most of our elections, the voter turnout of those that are registered is, you know, anywhere between 60 and 80%. So and those are the people that are registered. We're not even counting those that aren't registered. I think it would be really interesting in an election where everybody really did vote that could vote, and then it was a tie, and then we've got a real divided community. But I don't think that we've ever reached that, even in small elections where we get every eligible voter casting a ballot. I mean, you knew people who said, "Oh, I'm so sorry I didn't vote." And those are people that are engaged with you enough to know that you were a candidate and seemingly involved in what's going on politically.
Mm-hmm. I was trying to keep my sense of humor. I think a reporter from the New Times called and said, "So how do you feel?" And I said, "Well, if I was a member of the Dugert family, I would have had 13 extra votes because they have all those kids that were voting age, right? Too bad I only had 3. So you have to have your sense of humor."
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So are you encouraging candidates to develop their own constituency in whatever way they possibly can?
Whatever way they can.
I think, let me see if I have, there's a thank you for your info and your insights, Shelley. And I want to say that I appreciate that as well. I know we tried to schedule this several times, so I'm glad that you were available today, because I think it really does mean something to hear it from a candidate. I mean, I can say it as much as I want, but to hear it actually from a candidate who lived through an election that was decided by only 2 votes, I think is very special. And I appreciate you spending the time with us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. So now I'm going to go back to share screen and just talk for a moment about next week, because I think we're almost at our time. So next week, join us for discussion on vote by mail. It's easy and safe. Reminder, you can send questions to voter service at lwvslo.org. Follow us on Facebook, watch the recordings on YouTube or on our website. And then for election information, you can visit us or the elections office at slowvote.com or the league at lwvslo.org. And thank you again for your time today and making both Shelley and I feel welcome in your homes. Thank you very much.